Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
All right. Well, today, we're going back to 1854.
Ooh, interesting year.
Yeah, a time when, well, America's image in Europe, let's just say it wasn't exactly sparkling.
Not a popularity contest winner, huh?
Right. So we've got a pretty interesting letter here from, get this, the French novelist George Sand.
Oh, wow, George Sand.
Yep. Published right in the New York Daily Times.
Interesting choice.
And alongside it, a bunch of little news snippets, all from the same newspaper.
I see, setting the scene.
Exactly. So what we're going to try and figure out today is, well, two things, really. First, what was it that was making America so unpopular across the pond?
Yeah, makes sense.
And then what kind of picture were Europeans actually getting about America from what they were reading?
From their media. Fascinating.
Totally. You know, it's really interesting because you had these 1848 revolutions just a few years before.
Oh, right.
Sweeping across Europe.
Full of hope, right.
Yeah, and so many of them failed.
A lot of disillusionment after that.
Totally. And so you have all these people who were really yearning for, liberty.
Democratic reforms.
Exactly.
And they look to America.
Yeah, the land of, well, supposedly freedom and opportunity.
The shining beacon on the hill, right.
Yeah, supposedly. But what they see, well, it doesn't exactly match up to the hype.
It doesn't quite live up to the image.
Definitely not. And, that's where this letter from George Sand comes in.
Right.
And she wasn't just like any writer.
Oh, I know. Huge in France, right?
Oh, yeah. She was super prominent, but also a political activist.
Involved in those revolutions, too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, witnessed them firsthand.
Wow.
The whole aftermath. And so her letter to the American people, it's intense.
So what's the tone?
I mean, it's a plea, almost like a warning,
To shape up.
Yeah, like live up to your ideals.
I can imagine.
And she doesn't hold back at all. She talks about a cloud of witnesses.
Oh, powerful imagery.
Right, testifying against America.
That's strong.
Yeah, and the blood's still running red from past conflicts.
Ooh, wow.
I mean, you can just tell that she's feeling this European disillusionment deeply.
That's so interesting because it's a French novelist.
Yeah.
Addressing America. I mean, it shows how big this negative view of America was getting.
Right.
Even people who once admired the country.
For its revolutionary spirit.
Exactly. Starting to have doubts.
Yeah, serious doubts. Okay, so we've got this really, impassioned plea from George Sand, basically saying, America, get it together.
Right.
But let's dig into these news snippets now.
Yeah, let's see.
What kind of stuff were Europeans actually reading about America?
What were they seeing?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a mix, but there's definitely this trend.
Towards what?
Sensationalism. And negativity.
Yeah.
For example, there's an article, it talks about the, quote, unmitigated espionage, end quote, of American commercial agencies.
So they're painting this picture of...
Yeah, these shadowy figures,
stirring up trouble.
Yeah, and engaging in all that shady stuff.
I mean, unmitigated espionage, that's some strong language.
Right.
Makes you wonder, were these agencies really as bad as they're saying?
Yeah, were they really that nefarious?
Or is it, the media playing on those pre-existing fears?
And stereotypes about America.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a good question, and it really makes you think about the source.
Right?
Any biases they might have.
Yeah, because these snippets, it's basically like a curated selection of news.
Right, totally. Chosen for a European audience.
So it's a glimpse of how America was being presented.
But we can't just take it all at face value.
Not the full picture.
More like a carefully chosen snapshot.
To highlight certain things. Okay, so what else did they focus on?
Well, there's a lot of violence.
Okay.
Like a lot. There's this one account, pretty disturbing.
Of what?
A Chinese gang fight in California.
Oh, wow.
A white man was killed, quote, for fun.
For fun? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and just this casual mention of violence.
Like it's entertainment almost.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been shocking to Europeans.
Especially after all the revolutions and the anxieties.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, today we're still talking about this.
Violence in the media.
Yeah, and how it affects people, how they see things.
Makes you think it's not a new concern at all.
No, deep roots. The way we take in the news, interpret it.
It hasn't really changed.
Nope, still that focus on the negative.
The sensational.
Yeah, whatever confirms our biases.
Okay, so espionage, violence. Any other big themes?
Well, there's this kind of funny article
Yeah.
making fun of an American music critic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's lighthearted, but, it shows something.
Right.
How European views of American culture were changing.
Oh, how so?
America wasn't seen as this, beacon of refined culture anymore. It was becoming the land of the uncultured.
And the violent. Poor music critic getting roasted in a foreign newspaper.
Yeah. But it's a good reminder. Even these little cultural things.
Tiny exchanges.
They can all build this bigger story about a country's image.
And it wasn't just the press that was making America look bad either.
No.
Nope, there's a snippet about a letter. The American consul general in Spain.
An American official.
Yeah. And the letter was so bad.
How bad?
The Spanish newspaper wouldn't even publish it.
Wow, so an American official is actually adding to the problem.
Seems like it. Really shows you something.
What?
Even people representing America abroad could hurt the country's image.
Not just reporters or wild stories.
Coming from inside, too.
A real PR crisis.
On multiple fronts. But hey, were there any good stories?
Anything positive?
Yeah, anything that showed America in a better light.
There's this news item. Seems totally random.
Oh.
A guy named Thomas Child Jr.
Who's that?
A congressional candidate in New York. And the article praises him.
For what?
Opposing the Nebraska-Kansas Act.
That rings a bell.
Which was super unpopular in Europe.
I gotta be honest, the details are a little fuzzy. Remind me.
Basically, it allowed for slavery to potentially expand.
Into new territory.
Right. And for a lot of Europeans, the ones watching America and democracy and all that, that was seen as like a total betrayal.
Of American values.
Exactly.
Makes sense why they'd care.
Yeah, so even America's own political stuff.
Internal decisions.
Affecting their reputation abroad.
Wow, okay. So political decisions adding to the fire.
Yeah.
Anything else feeding this negative view?
Oh, yeah. There's this crazy story about a banker.
What happened?
He ran away from Cincinnati.
Why?
His bank went belly up.
Oh, no.
The whole story's wild. Stock speculation. Accusations that he was living super lavishly.
Oh, I see.
Then he escapes on a train.
That's it. Dramatic.
I know, right? And then there's graffiti on his building.
Saying what?
That it was built with widow's tears and orphans' cries.
Oh, wow. Sound like a Dickens novel.
Total drama.
But how does this connect to America's image?
Well, it taps into those anxieties.
About what?
America's economy, how stable it really was.
Right.
This idea that America was becoming morally corrupt.
Oh, I see. Like not living up to its ideals.
Exactly. George Sand's warning. And then the scandal happens. Greed, exploitation.
Yeah.
It just confirms those fears.
So it's not just politics and violence.
Yep.
It's the economy.
And a feeling that America was, well, morally bankrupt.
It's crazy how these stories, espionage, gang fights, a ruined banker.
They all fit together.
This big narrative of America declining.
In the eyes of Europe, yeah.
So fascinating. Perception really is shaped by all these little pieces.
Totally, like a mosaic.
Whether it's accurate or not.
Right, and in this case, America's image.
Not looking so good.
Not at all.
This is all really interesting. But hold on, before we go too deep analyzing everything.
Okay.
We've been talking about how Europeans saw America. But what about Americans themselves? How are they reacting to all this bad press?
And their changing image.
Yeah, I mean, George Sand's letter. It was in a New York paper.
Someone must have noticed.
Right. It's hard to imagine, right, that Americans were totally oblivious to this whole PR nightmare.
Across the Atlantic, yeah.
I mean, come on, George Sand's letter, it was in a big New York paper.
You'd think they'd notice.
Right. Someone was paying attention, right?
Well, they had to be. I mean, even the fact that they included those European news snippets.
In the New York Daily Times, yeah.
It shows they were aware.
Maybe even a little anxious.
Yeah.
About how America looked to the rest of the world.
Could be. But don't forget, this was a time of, well, intense national pride in America.
Expansion, manifest destiny, all that.
Exactly. So did this negative press, did it make them stop and think?
Or was it just brushed off as, European snobbery?
It's hard to say for sure.
Just from these sources?
Yeah, but I guess it was a mix of reactions.
Like what?
Well, some Americans, they probably got defensive.
Maybe even denial, right?
Totally. It's never easy to face up to your country's problems.
Especially when everyone's talking about them.
On a global stage, yeah.
There's that instinct,
Yeah.
to hold on to that image.
America as the exception.
The land of opportunity.
The shining city on the hill.
But then you have these reports from Europe saying something totally different.
A land of violence. Hypocrisy.
Oh.
Instability.
Almost like America was having an identity crisis.
Yeah, seeing themselves one way.
As this beacon of freedom and progress.
And then the world seeing them totally differently.
Not living up to those ideals.
And bridging that gap between how you see yourself and how the world sees you.
That's tough.
Super tough. For anyone, really.
Countries, too.
Oh, absolutely. It takes being willing to look at yourself, honestly.
Admit some uncomfortable truths.
And talk to people who see things differently.
So how does America handle this whole PR mess?
What do they do?
Yeah, do they even try to fix their image?
Or do they just double down?
On that whole American exceptionalism thing.
Tough one. Sadly, these sources we have.
They don't really give us the answers.
Not this time. They show us this moment in time.
The clash of image versus reality.
But the ending of the story.
It's a mystery.
For another deep dive, maybe.
It does make you think, though. Did this kind of foreshadow some America's struggles?
On the world stage.
Yeah. I mean, even now, there's that tension.
Between how America sees itself.
And how everyone else sees it.
It's a great point. Image, perception, international relations, they're always changing.
But some things stay the same.
Those core questions. How does a nation show the world what it stands for, what it wants?
How do you deal with criticism?
When people see you negatively.
And how do you deal with that gap between your own image and everyone else's?
It's not just an American problem either.
Every country deals with this.
And as we saw back in 1854, there are no easy answers.
No simple solutions.
It takes constant thinking, open conversations.
And being willing to accept that, well, what people think matters.
Even if it's not always true.
It's like this dance.
A dance.
Between trying to control your own story.
And being open to how others see that story.
A good dance, though. It takes self-awareness, flexibility.
And being willing to match your partner's steps.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about forcing your view on everyone.
It's about finding that rhythm, that balance.
Where you can understand each other, connect.
Even when you see things differently.
And sometimes that means taking a step back, listening.
Adjusting your own moves.
So we've explored this fascinating snapshot, America's image crisis in 1854.
We've seen how the bad press, the political choices,
You've the economic fears.
they all fed into this growing sense of disillusionment in Europe.
But for us, today, in the 21st century,
What can we learn from this trip back in time?
what's the takeaway?
Well, I think it really shows the power of narratives, how these seemingly unrelated stories, espionage, violence, financial ruin,
They come together to form this big story.
and that story shapes how people see things globally.
And those narratives, even if they're not true,
They have real consequences.
they can change political decisions, economic relationships, even how people from different cultures treat each other.
It reminds us that we all have a responsibility to think critically about the information we see, to question things, to look for different perspectives.
Especially now, with so much information coming at us all the time.
From everywhere. We need to develop that critical thinking muscle more than ever.
It's so easy to get trapped in those echo chambers online
Or just accept what we're told.
without thinking about if it's true, or if there's another side to the story.
And that's where the real danger is.
If we just let ourselves be shaped by these narratives.
We lose the ability to think for ourselves, to have real conversations, to build connections with people who see things differently.
So what's the solution? How can we stop just passively taking in these stories?
How do we become more active, more discerning?
Participate in the global conversation in a better way.
I think it starts with being curious.
And empathetic.
If we approach the world wanting to understand people, to see things from their point of view,
We're less likely to fall for those oversimplified stories.
and more likely to have thoughtful, respectful conversations.
It's about recognizing that there's always more than one side to everything.
That even people we disagree with, they have their own experiences, their own valid perspectives.
And it's about being willing to challenge our own beliefs,
To step outside of our comfort zones.
to engage with people who think differently.
Those moments of discomfort, of disagreement, that's where real learning happens, where we grow.
It's this ongoing process, questioning, listening, reflecting,
And it takes humility, open-mindedness.
and accepting that maybe we don't always have the answers.
But it's worth it, because in the end, it's through those efforts to understand each other, to connect, even when we disagree.
That we can make the world a better place.
More just, more compassionate, more peaceful.
Well said. It's a powerful thought, isn't it?
It is.
that our choices, our actions, they have these ripple effects.
They go way beyond us.
And in a world that's so interconnected, those ripples.
They can create some amazing positive change.
Speaking of positive change, I think it's about time to wrap things up.
For this deep dive.
But before we go, I want to leave everyone with something to think about. We've been talking about this whole image problem America had in Europe back in 1854.
When news didn't exactly zoom across the world.
Right. But it still mattered. Makes you wonder, are we really that different now? I mean, think about it.
Yes.
All the stuff we see and hear every day about other countries, other cultures.
Yeah.
Are we really getting the whole picture, or are we still falling for the same traps? Biased media, snap judgments.
It's something to think about, for sure. We've got more information than ever.
So much information.
But we still see those same tactics, those attention-grabbing headlines.
Oh, yeah.
Picking and choosing little stories that fit a certain narrative.
And always focusing on the negative stuff.
Exactly, the stuff that already fits our worldview. It takes real effort to stop and say, hold on, is this balanced? Is there something else I'm not seeing?
It's like we need to learn how to read between the lines.
Oh, I like that. Narrative literacy.
Yeah, right. To figure out those hidden messages, the agendas.
To see when we're being manipulated.
Or only getting one side of the story.
Exactly. It's not about being suspicious of everything.
Right.
But building that critical thinking muscle, questioning, looking for different points of view. That's how we form real opinions.
Informed opinions.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, it's not easy.
Oh, I know.
It's so much more comfortable to stay in our little bubble.
Surrounded by people who agree with us?
Right. But if we want to really understand the world,
we have to engage with the people who challenge us, the ones who see things differently.
Absolutely. That's where things get interesting, where we grow. It's not about being right or wrong.
It's about understanding that the world is complex, that there's always more than one side to every story, just like those Europeans back in 1854, figuring out how they felt about America. We have that same responsibility to think critically, to be respectful.
To see the humanity that connects us all.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about going beyond those knee-jerk reactions.
And seeing each other as people.
By being aware of our own biases, seeking out different views, approaching the world with curiosity and empathy.
We can help build a better global community. More informed, more compassionate.
What a great way to sum things up. It's not just about history, is it?
It's about understanding how we see the world. Now and always.
It's a call to be more mindful, more critical, more open-hearted in everything we do.
Love that.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new things to think about.
Maybe even inspired you to explore the world a little differently.
Until